Hey there, welcome to yet another video in this series. We are attempting this question on a special request from Mr. Ankit. This is the question number 11 from paper 2 of Patent Agent Exam 2018. We are required to draft a complete specification along with a few claims based on the information provided in the question. Before we get into the game mode, I would request you to pause the video and spend a few minutes reading through the disclosure. Welcome back. As per the reading of the disclosure, you would have identified that the invention belongs to noise filters. More specifically, electrical noise filters. Before we get into developing the information for the sections that we are required for this application, let's spend a few seconds in going through the disclosure, as this is a bit different from the disclosures that we have encountered in our previous videos. As you go through the disclosure, you would realize that the first few paragraphs are talking about the background, the requirement of a proper noise filter, and what kind of filters and what kind of constructions are available in the market these days. These two paragraphs are clearly talking about the existing prior art. As you move down, you see the disclosure directly jumps into referring to the figures. And we know as soon as they refer to the figures, it means they are talking about the exact implementation of the invention. The detailed description part, isn't it? As you go further down, they keep referring to the figures that they have provided. Like here, figure 2 and figure 3 are referred. And then the disclosure ends by showing us the kind of figures which are provided for our understanding. Remember, I said this is different from the earlier disclosures that we have encountered. So why would I say so? The reason I say so is because we don't have any paragraph which starts with the present invention discloses, or any paragraph which gives us a gist of the invention without referring to the figures of the invention. Remember, based on our technique, we use such paragraphs to build our summary, our claims, and our abstract, isn't it? So we don't have that paragraph here. So what do we do? What technique do we use here? Even though that particular paragraph is not there with us, one thing that we are sure of is starting from this particular paragraph all the way down is where the invention is disclosed, right? So we have to use these 3 or 4 paragraphs only to work upon our summary, description, claims, and abstract. We have nothing to do with the paragraphs above this as far as our invention description is concerned. So we have a focused approach on these paragraphs now. You'll understand as we go forward. First thing first, let's work on the title of the invention. So as we discussed, the invention relates to noise filter, but the noise filter will not give out much information. So the title we would write is an electrical noise filter. Moving on to our next requirement, which is the field of the invention. The field of the invention starts as the invention relates to, and more specifically, the invention relates to the improved feature, the objective of the invention that we need to disclose there. Based on the reading of the invention, we know that the invention relates to an electrical noise filter. And more specifically, the invention relates to an improved noise filter which can reduce the electrical and magnetic interferences to the wiring or the components of the filter circuit itself. So how do we write it? So we write it like this. The present invention relates to electrical noise filters. More specifically, the present invention relates to electrical noise filters with improved shielding from the electrical and magnetic interferences to the components of the electrical noise filter circuit. Moving on to the next requirement, which is drafting the background section for this disclosure. Now that is straightforward as far as this disclosure is concerned, because the first two paragraphs are dedicated to background itself. Here, if you notice, they start with noise filters, such as herein disclosures intended for use in desk computers. See, here there is a typo, so you can write the main function of noise filter is reduction of line related noise levels. From here they start, and then they talk about what are these filters called and how they are constructed as of now. And here they say commercially available noise filters employ a deep drawn nickel silver housing in place of half. So you realize that they are talking about how they are constructed these days. They give examples of other filters also. Many noise filters also available in market. A soldered jacket, I think a word is missing here. It could be many noise filters also available in market employ a soldered jacket tube of tin plate. So till this point you can consider your background. So how do we start? So you can start from here as it is, and then you cover this entire section till here could be your background. Let's move forward towards the next section, which is the summary section. Now the top two paragraphs are not going to help us because they are dedicated to the background part of the invention. So we have to work with the paragraphs from here onwards. Remember, we write summary to summarize the invention without referring to the figures or without going too much into implementation details. So we have to make do with the information that is available here. So how do we start? The starting is like this. The present invention provides an electrical noise filter with improved shielding against the electrical and magnetic interferences on the electrical noise filter circuit. We need to provide what the invention is related to. And then we go into how are we achieving that improved shielding against the electrical and magnetic interferences that we were talking about, right? So here we will find that information as how we are able to do it. So the electrical noise filter, see it says comprises a filter housing, which is an extruded aluminum tubing, which is again reduced in section at its one face in the manner of a shaft and is closed by a connector socket at its other face. This is the first part of our summary, as in first element of our filter section. Another element is an insulating material housing, which is actually inserted in the filter housing, and then this insulating material housing is subdivided into chambers. So we are describing our noise filter without going too much into detail. Now these chambers have these electrical components. Mounted in these chambers are electrical components. And here they have provided examples of what all components that we are talking about. As you go down, they say that they have few flat plugs which are connected to these electrical components that we have talked about, right? As you go further down, you see that the electrical components and the flat plugs connected to these components are embedded in epoxy resin, and again they say some specific feature of it, that only the outwardly facing part of the flat plugs being left free. Further down there is another component which says a ground conductor, which is extending over the entire length of the insulating material housing. And this ground wire is actually connected to the filter housing also, the wall of the filter housing, using this copper plate. So with this, if we are able to create few sentences out of these relevant portion of this disclosure, we would be able to come up with the summary. Moving on, we go to the brief description of drawings. Now as you see, we have 3 drawings as such. So we need to provide description for these 3 drawings, the one-liner description that we talk about. Figure 1 illustrates this, figure 2 illustrates this, figure 3 illustrates this, right? So where do we have those information that we are looking for? Figure 1 shows a partially sectioned top view of a filter housing. Figure 1 description is here. Similarly, we will look for the information for figure 2 as well. So here when you see as shown in the partial sectioned view in figure 2. So it's nothing but figure 2 shows a partially sectioned view of the noise filter as in accordance with the invention. What about figure 3? When you go down, so here we find section view, right? So figure 3 is a sectional view as indicated in figure 2. Looks difficult to refer to another figure, but that's how they have given it. So they are sectional view of each other. So we are done with the description of our figure 1, 2, 3. Moving to the detailed description of the invention. So here is where they start with the figure 1, 2, 3 description. So we need to pick information from here. In fact, we need to take information from here, all this, cut, copy, paste, and build our detailed description. You can go completely down, covering all these sections. With this, your figure 1, 2, 3 are covered and detailed description is done. This was simple, isn't it? Moving on to the claims part. Now we don't have the summary section with us, but we have already worked on the summary, right? So we can use the information from that summary to build our claim. Now our invention is about noise filter, which has improved shielding against the electrical and magnetic interferences that happens. How do they achieve? They achieve it with the help of filters. In fact, the multiple filters that they have. One is a filter housing, another one is an insulating material housing, which holds all the electrical components in a manner that the interferences or the effect of the interferences is reduced. So how do we draft the claim? So we start with IV claim. A electrical noise filter comprising, now we write the parts of it. First part is a filter housing. Now we can define what kind of filter housing that we are talking about. So we have extruded aluminum tubing. We can avoid aluminum here. We can simply say extruded tubing. Aluminum is a specific implementation. We can maybe use it in the dependent claim. And then we further define what kind of housing it is. So wherein the filter housing is reduced in section at its one face 15 in the manner of a shaft and closed by a connector socket at its other face. So this will be your first element of our noise filter. Second element is our insulating material housing. How do we start? We say an insulating material housing, wherein the insulating material housing is inserted into the filter housing. Okay? And then we further talk about it by saying that wherein the insulating material housing is subdivided into what? Into, because they say chambers, we say one or more chambers. And then we have next element as components, electrical components. So one or more electrical components, wherein the one or more electrical components are mounted in the one or more chambers. Right? We may ignore providing details about what kind of electrical components that we are talking about, because I am assuming that in terms of noise filters, this would be the standard components. We may not talk about it in the independent claims. Moving down, we have another element here, a ground conductor. So this would be our final element, which is a ground conductor extending over the entire length of the insulating material housing. So with this, we have our first independent claim done. You can see one format on the right hand side of your screen. Let's work on a few dependent claims also. Now, as we have worked earlier, dependent claims should provide a bit more information about the elements that have been introduced in the claim 1, or provide further details about the entire apparatus that we have claimed in claim 1. So starting with the first element, which was the filter housing, which is made of extruded tubing. We ignored aluminum there, right? We can use this as our first dependent claim. How do we write it? The electrical noise filter as claimed in claim 1, wherein the filter housing is made of extruded aluminum tubing. We are done with our first dependent claim. Similarly, in this paragraph, we are provided with information about how they are connected to the appropriate ends of the flat plugs. Who are connected? The electrical components. So here we can write the electrical noise filter as claimed in claim 1, wherein the electrical components are connected to the appropriate ends of one or more flat plugs. So we introduce the concept of flat plugs also using the dependent claim. Moving on, we can find few more dependent claims if we use this information, because we have electrical components and flat plugs here, which are embedded in epoxy resin, and some parts of the flat plugs are being left free. So we can use this as one embodiment of our invention. So one dependent claim. How do we write? The electrical noise filter as claimed in claim 3, the previous claim, because that's where we have introduced flat plugs, right? Repeating it, the electrical noise filter as claimed in claim 3, wherein the electrical components and the flat plugs connected to those components are embedded in epoxy resin 30. Only the outwardly facing parts of the flat plugs are being left free. So this is one way they have connected it and used the epoxy resin. So this can become part of our dependent claim. Anything else? Yes, we can talk about this copper plate and how the grounded conductor is connected to the filter housing using copper plate. How do we write it? The electrical noise filter as claimed in claim 1, wherein the grounded conductor is connected to the filter housing through a copper plate. Now if you want to write one more, what you can write is how the copper plate is welded to the filter housing using the ultrasonic mechanism. This could be another dependent claim. You can move down to see if you can get or garner any more dependent claims from this portion as well. But in the interest of time, you can stop at 2 or 3 because you have to complete the specification as well, right? Finally, to the last section, which is the abstract. Again, we move to the paragraph that provided us with the claims and the summary, which is here, right? So the way we wrote summary, we will take exact information and put it as abstract, ensuring that we don't cross 150 words. So how do we start? We say the present invention provides an electronic noise filter with improved shielding against the electrical and magnetic interferences on the electrical noise filter circuit. Now we say the electrical filter circuit comprises a filter housing. This particular information, you can use all this information, of course, based on the summary. We can then move on to talking about how the electrical components are mounted in the chambers. Moving further down, we can provide this information also about the flat plugs and how they are embedded in the epoxy resin. Finally, we can also talk about ground conductor and how it is connected to the face wall of the filter housing. A simple abstract is provided on your right hand side. So with this, we are done preparing the specification for this invention as well. As you would have realized, this was not as straightforward as the previous disclosures that we dealt with. But then once you know what you are looking for this particular sections of the application, you would be able to do the job. So don't get disturbed if you don't get the structure that you are habitual of. You can do it. Just read the question calmly. I hope this was helpful. Until next time, take care.